Dorothy, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Would you like to introduce yourself for the listeners?
Yeah, so I am a mind-body coach and a new author. I just published my book in October of last year, and I help people heal from childhood trauma. And the reason I got into it is because of my own personal story and healing journey. So I help people heal the way I healed, and I'm actually a therapist as well, so a mind body therapist. And I live in California. I have a family, and I'm just really focused on getting this message out right now to the world so people can heal from their childhoods.
Awesome, thank you. And
Mm-hmm.
for those who are watching the video version of this, your book is just over your right hand shoulder there,
Mm-hmm.
back of the shot, but we will talk more about that a little bit later on. So I'm sure all the listeners want to know, could you share a little bit more about your story and how exactly you healed and
Yeah,
how you're sharing that?
I'd love to. So I actually lived most of my life up until my late 40s with post-traumatic stress disorder from childhood sexual abuse, but I didn't know it. So that's kind of the interesting part of my story is um, I was pretty happy just being dependent on my husband, who was an attorney, and we were raised in a like a Christian community, so that um, his role was the provider, and my role was as his wife would be to support him. Well, the problem was that as an attorney, he got burnt out, and he told me, I can't do this anymore. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to school. And like we're in our late 40s, we're going to go back to school and we're going to become therapists. And I think that's going to be a better fit for us. And because I was just used to following his direction, I agreed. And but the thing that happened was, as a requirement to become a therapist, you have to go into your own personal psychotherapy, and I'd never done that before. So in my very first session in therapy, and I told my therapist, I'm good. I just need to do this for school. And she's like, okay. And but the first day, my very first session, she's like, I think you have post-traumatic stress disorder. And that's when it started for me, because I deep down inside, I had this nagging feeling that something was wrong with me. And I'd just been kind of ignoring it my whole life. And when she told me that, that's when I started to face it, that what happened to me is still affecting me. And that's how I started my healing journey. And it kind of coincided with me learning how to be a therapist at the same time.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you weren't aware until you got therapy as part of your new education that this
Yeah.
was causing. Wow, gosh.
Yeah. Because I'd been practicing using spiritual practices to try and heal an emotional wound. And it kind of worked, but it works through bypassing the body. So I had disconnected from my body and tried to use spiritual practices like prayer and reading my Bible and listening to my, husband and listening to my pastors. And so it kind of worked. But the problem was that injury caused chronic stress, which eventually led to post-traumatic stress disorder and then also chronic illness as well, because it remained in my body and I kept bypassing it, trying to think, positive. And it It works in the short term, I think, but not in the long term.
Interesting. So it's kind of a case of not treating the root symptom, the root cause, and dealing with the symptoms.
Yeah, that's it exactly. Yes. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Wow. So, how did that healing journey take place? I imagine that was over quite a prolonged period,
It
was it?
was many years. I was going to school, so I was learning the theories of therapy, family systems, and cognitive behavioral therapy. But what really helped me was that I had a supervisor who specialized in trauma, in the treatment of trauma. And she was a mind body specialist. And so as I started seeing clients, because eventually you do have to actually start seeing clients, I would get really triggered and I couldn't stay present, listening, trying to help my clients. And so my supervisor suggested I learn how to um, do mind body therapy techniques, which were developed for trauma. And so that really turned it around for me because as I learned how to do mind body therapy, I healed myself as well. So, um,
So you were your own, as you were learning it, you could immediately, uh, I guess, do it on yourself in a way.
yeah, yeah, because that's how we learned. We learned the theory and then we practice on each other. So, as I would practice on my fellow trainee therapists, and she would practice on me. And um, I just started having these huge breakthroughs because I'd never connected to my body before. Like I connected to my little 6-year-old inner child, and um, I was able to experience what happened and still stay present. And I didn't go into fight, flight, and freeze. And then I was able to provide for myself what's called a new corrective emotional experience. And it worked. It really worked. It was amazing because I'd never dealt with it before. I'd always been told like to pretend it never happened, to pretend to try and forget it. But when
Wow.
I started dealing with it, it was like felt really good. It felt really, really good, actually. It wasn't easy, but um, dealing with it is, is that healing process where I can face my fears and stop running away from them.
Amazing, amazing.
Yeah.
So, if I may ask, what were some of the, I guess, physical challenges that you experienced when you were dealing, I guess, before you even knew it was an issue, but you didn't know what was causing those challenges? What sort of physical challenges were you facing?
Yeah. I had struggled with my weight my whole life. I started putting on weight as a child. Uh, and my mom put me on, my first diet when I was around 10. I was chubby. So I had started dieting and I could lose the weight. But what happened and what I discovered was that every time I lost the weight, people would compliment me. And just, of course, they're just kind. They're saying, "Oh, you look so good. I'm so proud." And my mom too, "I'm so proud of you. You lost the weight." And what would happen was I'd get scared because uh-oh, people are noticing me. And that's the root that was connected to the sexual abuse, because in my mind, in my little child 6-year-old mind, it was my fault because I had done something to attract that abuse. And having never dealt with that, every time I'd lose the weight and people started noticing me and recognizing me and seeing me, I got scared. And subconsciously, I just had to put the weight back on because that was the only tool I had as a child to stay hidden, to stay invisible, to not get hurt. And that was the key for me. to realize that, oh, that's why I gained the weight back all the time. And I could never keep it off. I mean, I lost hundreds and hundreds of pounds over the years, and I'd immediately start putting it back on immediately until recently. Yeah.
Wow. That's
So
interesting. So
yeah.
interesting.
And actually, obesity is connected statistically. It's one of the ways that kids protect themselves if they've been sexually abused or molested. It's where we have our control. We can put on the weight to protect ourselves. And have you ever heard of the ACE study, the Adverse Childhood Experiences study?
No.
That was where they made that connection, because it was a weight loss program medically designed to help severely obese patients. And it was a complete failure because everybody gained the weight right back. And then the doctor in charge decided to figure out what was going on. Like, why? I mean, I know these people want to lose weight and they do so good, and then they gain it all back. And what he discovered was adverse childhood experiences. One of them was sexual abuse, but there's a list of them. That the more adverse child experiences a person has, the more likely they're going to suffer from obesity, heart disease, addiction, and all kinds of health problems as adults. And it statistically correlates to how many adverse childhood experiences one has had.
It's super interesting. So last year I read the book Atomic Habits.
Uh-huh.
I actually read it 3 times because I loved it so much. It's just behind me over my shoulder. It's one of those.
Uh-huh.
And in it, James Clear, the author, talks about stop focusing on the outcomes. So most people trying to lose weight focus on the outcome of trying to lose weight. One step better is focus on the habits and behaviors that drive those outcomes. So if you focus on, let's say, eating more vegetables, eating the right sorts of foods, moving regularly, sleeping well, managing stress, you are more likely to achieve the outcome that you want because habits drive your outcomes. But then he takes it one step further and says that your identity drives your habits and behaviors. So the way I'm seeing this is your identity wasn't changing. You were temporarily changing your behaviors and your outcomes. But because the real root of your identity, you still had that trauma that was driving you to not want to be seen and want to be kind of hidden.
Yeah.
That was driving your habits.
That's
I
good.
guess eating more food, causing, and so therefore every time you made a temporary change in your behaviors, that would only be temporary because it was always driven and overcome by this originating identity. And until you fix that,
it's the root that you were talking about earlier, getting to the emotional root, which is who we are, and that forms early. It forms in childhood, who we are, and that relationship that I had with myself was what was driving my behaviors. And the relationship I had with myself was, I was scared. I was scared of myself. I was disconnected from myself. I didn't know who I was because I just didn't have that. I didn't develop that relationship. My identity growing up was in Jesus and Christ, and it was based on my faith. So that's where I looked to become more like him, to get rid of the sin and the bad parts of me, and try and be a better person. And the problem though that I ran into was that the bad parts of me that I felt was sin, was actually shame. It was shame from my childhood. So there was like this communication going on between what I thought was sin, a bad part of me that I was trying to get rid of, which was really a shame emotion, an emotion of shame that I was a bad person. And I just, that's what caused the wrong identity, I guess, of who I was.
Interesting.
And that I don't have to be ashamed of who I am, that I can get to know myself and love myself and accept myself for who I am. And that's my true identity.
Amazing. So you now work with people and take them through their, well, a very similar journey to the one that you go on as a therapist and a mind-body coach. So how does that look when you start working with someone, and how do you sort of take them through that journey? If you don't mind sharing a bit.
Yeah, I focus on connecting their mind to their body. That's really where I my focus or treatment is, helping them reconnect to their body. So using breath rhythms. That's one of the first things I teach my clients, how to meditate and how to use slow, deep breathing and different kinds of breath rhythms, heart breathing, ocean breathing, to get you connected to your body and to give your control back to yourself. And it really helps helps with your fight, flight, and freeze reaction that you go into when you're scared. And then we keep building on that. So that's a big resource. Doing a body scan, getting comfortable going inward and feeling the sensations of what's going on the inside of my body, instead of focusing on the outside all the time. But spending some time going on the inside and feeling sensations, positive and negative. Don't be afraid of the negative sensations. Don't be afraid of the pain that you feel. Just try and feel it, try and connect to it. It's a mixture. It's not all positive, it's not all negative, it's both. But just getting more comfortable feeling and being within your own body and feeling you're comfortable with being who you are, because it's a big part of who we are. And then activating our attachment system. I'd say that's probably, the big three there is activating our attachment system, because when we're scared as human beings, when we're scared, we want to connect with another person. We reach out. When kids are scared, they move immediately towards mom, like they grab onto her leg. And we do that still as adults. When we're scared, we want to connect with somebody. So activating that attachment system that's in our body, looking into each other's eyes, breathing together, talking, like with inner child work is what I'm talking about now, inner child work. But you can also activate your attachment system with your senses in nature, connecting to nature, connecting to your pets, your animals, therapy dogs, people's animals activates their attachment system. And then learning how to attach to yourself, and building that place within you that you can go when you're scared, and going inward and attaching to yourself, and working with your mind and your body together, that your partner, you partner together. You can trust your body. Your body's on your side. Your body knows you, wants to help you, wants you to be healthy, wants you to be happy. And developing that relationship, that connection. And that's how I help people heal their trauma.
Amazing. That's so interesting. There's a few things I want to kind of dive into, because I think there's some really interesting stuff you mentioned there. I think a key takeaway I want to highlight, probably for the listeners, is you mentioned it in several ways. connecting the mind to the body and trusting your body. Your body's on your side. I think that's such an interesting point, you know, from my angle as a fat loss coach. So many people are, should we say, reliant on external, I guess we could call them stimuli or measures, like, oh, this diet has told me to eat in this way, or the weight on the scale, or so-and-so told me, you know, I should be doing this. Or maybe, you know, I was just talking to someone who was saying how they've gone on Google and they found a nutrition plan. But I'm like, it's not based on you. It's
Right.
such a, you know, it's a really generic cookie cutter 1500 calorie, let's say, nutrition plan online. It's not like customized to them at all. Whereas on the opposite side of the spectrum, you have your internal kind of measures and stimuli, if you will, like, how does this food make me feel? How are my energy levels? How am I sleeping? You know, how was my recent workout? And I think that's such an important connection we need to make.
Yes.
Because often,
Yes.
I think in modern day, especially with more stress than ever, we disconnect because, oh, I have to get this email, I have to prepare for this meeting. Oh, I feel terrible inside, I'm hungry, I'm stressed, and whatever. I must push that down, I must suppress that. And focus and rely, you know, we push away these internal measures and feedback systems, we say. So
yeah, almost as if we're afraid, you know, of
yeah.
our natural needs. Like I'm afraid I'm just gonna go bonkers and, you know, become addicted if I you know, if I let myself have one little drink. I can't do that. It's almost as if we're afraid of just our natural body's needs and desires. And I think that's a lot of what I do too, is I guide people to trust their instincts, to trust the message, what they're feeling, to trust these sensations, these needs that we have. It's okay. It's okay if you're tired. You can take a rest. You can take a nap if you're tired. It's okay. I have clients that fall asleep on me sometimes in sessions, and they're like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." No, it's okay. It's okay. Your body needed the rest. You eventually will wake up, and they always do. So, but developing that kinder relationship with themselves and trusting, because I that was my experience. My experience was, if I could just trust my body and trust that my body is for me, that is going to take care of me, that what I'm feeling is good, you know, it's good for me, and go with it, and just go with it. Let my mind relax and follow my body's lead. Follow my body's lead instead of trying to control what I needed to do. Yeah.
Such a nice point. In terms of like, oh, I can't possibly have a slice of bread because I'll end up eating the whole loaf. If you were listening to your body, it would tell you after, you know, a couple of slices, I am nicely satisfied, thank you, you know, I'm good. We can come back tomorrow. But we completely disregard it and we either binge or we completely restrict. I think that's very interesting.
Yeah.
One example that's just sprung to mind that I guess is very relevant for me right now is, so I'm currently fasting. I don't normally fast. I normally do a shorter fast, and that's a whole different conversation. But as of today, I'm doing a longer 22-hour fast. So I'm just eating dinner tonight. But I haven't eaten anything all day. At 6:30 p.m. in the UK where I'm right now, I haven't eaten since last night. And honestly, I feel great. I feel totally sustained energy. I don't feel hungry. What's really interesting, in the past, I would have never been able to do this because I was so distrusting of my body. I think I was like, oh my goodness, I haven't eaten in 2 hours. My body's tearing itself apart. Like, I literally thought my body was breaking down and dying after a few hours of not eating. Whereas now I can go much longer than this if I wanted to, but I don't choose to. And it's very interesting now that I'm so trusting, I guess, in my body. It's quite interesting from a curiosity point, just watching the hunger kind of, it comes around when I normally eat because we are habitual,
Mm-hmm.
The hunger will come around when I normally eat because that's what I do every day normally. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I'm hungry.
Yeah.
And I know it'll pass. Half an hour later, it's gone, and I feel totally fine again. If
Mm-hmm.
I know
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably going to get hungry in the next hour or so, then that's fine because I'm about to eat. And just kind of watching from almost like taking a step back and seeing that happen would only be realistic or possible because of the trust that I have in myself that I know I'm not going
Yeah.
to kind of tear myself apart. So
Yeah. Yeah.
super interesting.
Yeah. I've tried fasting before as well. And what I would tell myself was I would say, I know you're hungry. I know you're hungry, but it's not going to be forever. Like, we're going to eat tomorrow. Like, if I'm fasting, I was fasting for that day. We're going to eat tomorrow. I promise. We're going to eat tomorrow. And I know you're hungry. And we're going to be okay. Because I had that fear too. Like, I had that fear that, oh, I'm, um, I'm starving. I'm starving myself, and um, my my metabolism is going to go down, and if I don't eat, all the time, I have to keep telling my body to burn energy, and some of it was just not understanding the real what was going on inside metabolically in my body, and so getting educated also helped. Like, no, you have fat on you. Your body can use that fat for energy, and you're going to be okay. But the emotional part was um, like, I'm feeling deprived. I can't. I'm so hungry. I can't do anything. Um, so just changing that mindset was very helpful to me. Like the way I talk to myself, like, you can do this. You're going to eat again. You're going to be okay. And I know you're hungry, and hunger doesn't feel good.
No, absolutely. One of the ways I like to see it is connecting with, I guess, our evolution and past. As cavemen, we would feast and we would famine. On the days when we hadn't eaten for a few days, our body wouldn't just like break down and die. That's strangely when we become most focused because our body knows it needs to go and find more food. So I could argue, I could probably say this, my focus throughout this afternoon, having not eaten, is arguably slightly better. I know
Yeah.
in the morning it's slightly better because I'm not eating, because in a way my body's like almost not searching out food, but it's kind of heightened awareness and focus almost. So if I needed to go and catch a rabbit so I could eat lunch, I could. So our body is evolved to manage that, but in 21st century we get so far away from listening to those internal cues and internal emotions that
Yeah.
it's quite
Yeah.
dangerous.
I agree. Yeah. That's so cool though that we have that this information now, and it's also the evolution, understanding evolution and how our brains evolved has really informed the trauma mind body therapy as well, because understanding how we survived, like how my mom and dad survived, gets passed to me through that relationship, and how they survived is very different. They use very different skills as far as what I needed to survive. So what they, because of our modern society, how fast it's changing, it's not, we've changed our environment so fast, much faster than our brain has evolved to deal with struggles. And so when my mom and dad went into fight, flight, and freeze, my mom went into fight. She was of the World War II generation. So she was like, oh, you just, you pull up your bootstraps and, go on, keep going forward. And when I was sexually abused as a child, her reaction of fight, it didn't apply to me. What I needed was someone to talk to and help me, and understand that it wasn't my fault, and I couldn't just forget it and move on. So using that understanding of how we attach and how we deal with struggles and traumas in our brain was really helpful and has really guided the treatment of trauma through mind-body therapies. So yeah, it's really cool to be using all this evolution science now in nutrition, the mind-body connection, mental health. Yeah.
Definitely science for the betterment of human race. I think this is a good opportunity to discuss your book a little bit more. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about your book and the listeners?
Yeah, I'd love to. It's my story of how I healed from post-traumatic stress disorder. Each chapter tells a story and with a lesson, and a lesson that's very simple with an exercise at the end to help other people who can relate to my story start their own healing journey. And they're just exercise, mind-body exercises like the slow, deep breathing, and that I talked about earlier. And one thing that a lot of feedback that I get is that it's really enjoyable read. Like it's a good story. It's not like an academic teaching, or unlike, maybe other self-help books. It's reads like a novel, because it's my story, it's my parents' story, it's my kids' story, it's my little bit of my husband's story, and then along with the teaching of how I healed, what caused my post-traumatic stress disorder, and then how I healed, and then how, when I healed myself, it actually broke that cycle and healed my children as well, because I passed my healing forward. It became transgenerational healing because of that special relationship between a parent and child. And your kids are always your kids. It doesn't matter that they were adults. When I started healing myself, they're still my kids. We still have that bond. We still have that relationship. So it really helped them. Healing myself really helped them deal with their own issues like anxiety and, the struggles that they have within themselves, finding meaning and purpose and loving and accepting themselves. It passed forward. So that's what my book's about, and that's what I want to pass on to everyone who reads it. I want to continue passing forward my healing to others.
I love that. I think the format of that sounds very actually digestible, easy to, when stories are so much more, we take so much more away from stories than we do, say, statistics or things like that. And then to finish that with some exercises and some quick lessons, I think sounds like a really effective way of creating that change. So that's awesome. And then the transgenerational part and then title and how that's totally makes sense, the way that's been passed on. I think that's very, very cool. I know
thank you.
I've read some self-help books that I get 50 pages in, I'm just like, this is too much. It's such a grind to get through them. It's so dry, should we say.
I've read a lot of quarter self-help books too, and so that's why it's a short book. So my editor asked me, you can publish it now after a year or two writing, but you have to ask, do you want your readers to read it? And then that really kind of woke me up as far as, oh yeah, I want my readers to read it. Of course I do. So then, she said, well, then you need to rewrite it and make it readable for your readers. And that's why I switched to the stories. And then it's a very short book too. It's only 150 pages long. So people can read it, I've been told, within just, a couple nights, a few hours a night, and you're done. And then you can reread it.
That's great. Short and sweet, succinct. That's how good books should be. Very good. So where can listeners find that book?
It's on Amazon.
Okay.
And it's on my website. So my website is just my name, Dorothy Husen, www.dorothyhusen.com. And there's a link there. You can also listen and download chapter 5. I recorded chapter 5 myself and put that on my website. Or you can go to Amazon directly, where it's available in paperback and also Kindle. Right now there's a sale going on, so it's $1.99, I think, for my Kindle version, the ebook.
Perfect. And they just search the title of the book, which reminds us of that again.
Breaking the Chains of Transgenerational Trauma, My Journey from Surviving to Thriving. But actually, just put in my name. That's probably the easiest way to find it. It's just to put my name in the search engine on Amazon, and you'll find it that way.
Awesome. Dorothy Husen, Husen. Right, I've got a few more questions I'd like to ask before we wrap things up. My favorite question, if I may. Dorothy, if you could get the entire world population to do one thing every day, what would it be and why?
That's easy for me. It would be to go inward every day, go inward and develop a loving, kind, compassionate, accepting relationship with yourself. To love yourself unconditionally. Go inward, get to know yourself, and fall in love with yourself. That would be it.
Amazing. Amazing. So what would you suggest as the, let's say for a beginner who's not done this sort of work before, what would be the easiest, simplest exercise that they could do to start doing that regularly?
Start learning how to meditate. Go on my website, and I have audio files where I'll teach you how to do different kinds of breathing, guide you through it. Start with just slowing your breath down, because your breath acts as that natural doorway to your inner world. So that's where you could start. And also try and get into, a community of others who are practicing mindfulness, meditation, healing trauma. There's a lot of different, depending on what flavor of community you want to join. There's, of course, the faith-based communities or psychology, based communities, or women's groups. But get involved. I would, suggest get involved in a group, because we're social beings. We have fun together. It's more fun to do it with other people than by ourselves.
Nice, great tip. I think especially now with distancing in place and a lack of should we say social availability, I guess, getting into this sort of journey with the help of others, I guess, with the accountability, you could call it accountability in a sense.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah, help. Amazing. So, and to summarize, you have guided meditations on your website.
I do, and videos. I also run a course pretty regularly that if people are interested in actually taking a course with me. It's called Parent Myself Securely. So we learn how to meet our own emotional needs and parent ourselves securely, reparent ourselves, grow ourselves up into happy, securely attached adults.
Amazing. Lovely. Last couple of questions before we finish up. What are you curious about right now?
Oh, I'm really curious about nutrition right now. The last 3 years, I lost 70 pounds on doing the ketogenic diet. And I've been reading books and really fascinated to see the connection between nutrition and our emotions and our mind and our body, of course, but that connection between what we eat and then how it affects our emotions and our mind and our brain. And especially for me, since, it was really the key for me was healing my emotional trauma that finally allowed me to keep the weight off. So yeah, I'm really fascinated with the ketogenic diet, the low carb, high fat, and the different ways that people are using that diet and that lifestyle to heal not only physical illness, but mental illness, emotionally, and all that we're learning. And I think it goes back to the evolutionary science too, as well. Like, this is how we used to eat. Like you said, we used to have feasting and fasting. And before we started mass producing food, that's how our bodies, I think, naturally, wherever our ancestors grew up, that's what we need to look at, or that's what I'm interested in. Like, I grew up, my ancestors grew up in Japan and in Europe, in Eastern Europe and Japan. So I'm 50-50 and in my DNA. And so that's going to have a relevance on what works best for me, what kind of nutrition works best for me. What do you think about that?
Totally agree. We have, I mean, looking at DNA and figuring out what sort of food is best is what I do, basically.
Okay.
So, yeah, I definitely think that your upbringing, generationally upbringing, definitely has an impact. And I would say as well, so nature versus nurture. So I guess nature will be the DNA part, but nurture as well. Like, I was very lucky in that I have an Italian mother, so I'm half Italian. I was very lucky that every meal was sat down at the dinner table, home cooked everything was cooked from scratch, and cooking and eating was kind of an event, if you will. So a topic I really like to talk about quite often is not just what we eat, but both how we eat as well. Especially in modern day, we tend to eat at our desks and be rushed and, eat something on the go, grab something from the drive-through and eat it on the way to work or as we drive back to the office or whatever. And taking that time, I think Western Europeans, from my knowledge, I don't know about Eastern Europeans, but Western Europeans especially do it very well. Taking long lunches, lots of time, sitting down, and the Mediterranean diet is typically higher in fat, which I personally am a fan of. I'm not sure it works for everyone, especially Tuesday athletes who require, high proportion of carbohydrates. But for a lot of people, I think high fat can be very beneficial, especially if, I say that with the caveat of coming from good natural whole food sources, of course. But yeah, definitely think there's huge elements of tailoring and eating more like we evolved to eat. If you grew up in regions where there were, I don't know, lots of Brazil nuts, you would eat lots of Brazil nuts, right? You wouldn't eat wheat if there was no wheat available, so your body would adapt to that. And right now we can throw literally anything in our system. We can eat any food we want any time of the year. So I think seasonality actually plays a part. If we can get seasonal produce, that's probably going to be better because it's naturally there, if you know what I mean, which is going to have some impact on us. But a whole rabbit hole we can go into.
That's what I'm totally fascinated with right now.
Awesome. Yeah. It's so interesting, and I'm so lucky that I do this for my job full time. This is what I do. So I'm very, very lucky and grateful to have that opportunity. So Dorothy, thank you so much. It's been an amazing conversation, but could you share where the listeners can find you? Just reiterate again where they can find your book, social media and all that stuff.
Yes, just my website. Just go to www.dorothyhusen.com, DOROTHYHUSEN.com, and you can find all the links there. Just go to my website. And also, I'd love to hear from you if anybody wants to send me an email, sign up for a Get Acquainted call. I'd love to talk to you and get to know you if you have any questions or anything.
Amazing.
Yeah, thanks.